everyone, it's Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Now today's video I'm going to show you how to make our pentagon shaped blanket. I call it the swirling rainbow because I'm using a striping yarn and it swirls around as you work the pentagon shaped blanket. Now it measures about 24 by 24 inches, but of course you can continue doing the rounds for as many as you want to in order to adjust the size that you need. It's a beautiful pentagon shaped blanket and it has this wonderful trim that looks like hearts. Isn't that pretty? And of course, don't panic. I'll show you how to do all of those stitches. Now this is a free crochet pattern on my blog, and you can find that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. To make the rainbow swirl blanket the size that I have made it according to the pattern, you're going to need 2 of these Super Saver Red Heart striping yarns. Each one has 5 ounces, so you're going to need about 10 ounces of yarn. Now, if you're going to make it bigger, of course, you're going to need more yarn. To make it the size according to the pattern, you need 2. And these are 2 different ones that I have on hand. We're not going to be using them today, but they would be beautiful for this pattern. This is flamingo stripes, and this is bright stripes. The one that we're using, I believe, is called parrot stripes. It has purples and greens, and that's the one we're going to be using for our demonstration today. But you'll need a total of 10 ounces of any medium weight number 4 acrylic yarn. You do not have to use striping yarn. You can do it all in one color. The ombres would be very pretty for this pattern as well. And you can use your scrap yarns and come up with a different color palette all on your own. Use your imagination. We're going to be stitching today with our eye hook, and the eye hook is a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. You'll need a needle just to weave in ends and a pair of scissors. To begin, we'll start with our slip knot, and we're going to chain 5. We're going to join this chain 5 into a circle. So we'll place the tail of yarn over our hook and pull it through that loop. Then we'll make that little stay knot so our loop doesn't come undone. Put our hook in, pull up a loop, and chain 3. This chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. We're going to stitch another double crochet and chain 2. Now we're going to stitch 2 double crochets and chain 2. And we're going to do this so we have a total of 5 sets of 2 double crochets, chain 2. You'll notice that as I'm stitching my sets, I am stitching over this tail of yarn where we began. And that's so we can close the hole up when we're finished. And I'll show you that in just a second. One, 2, 3, 4. So I need one more set of 2 double crochets, chain 2. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of 2 double crochet, chain 2. I'm going to join to that chain 3 with a slip stitch. I'm going to slip stitch in the next double crochet and then slip stitch in this chain 2 space and chain 3. Now, before we do row 2, we're going to turn this over and we're going to gently pull on that string, and that's going to close up that hole. We'll go ahead and take our needle and weave this in, and then we won't have to worry about it when we finish our blanket. It'll already be done. So we'll just go around, making sure that that hole's closed up. Then we'll go up and back a couple of times. I probably should have left a little bit longer of a tail, but it will still hold. All right, we'll go ahead and cut off that end. And that first row is complete, and we've already weaved in our end, so we won't have to come back and worry about that later. So row 1 has 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of 2 double crochet, chain 2. All right, for row 2, our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. We're going to place another double crochet in that chain 2 space and chain 2. Then we'll stitch 2 more double crochets in this same chain 2 space. And chain 2. Then we'll come to the next chain 2 space and we'll stitch 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. And then chain 2. And then we'll complete this stitching 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets, chain 2 in each of the chain 2 spaces around. I've completed 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet, chain 2 in each of those 5 chain 2 spaces. So now I'm going to join to my chain 3 with a slip stitch. We'll slip stitch in that next double crochet, and then we'll slip stitch in that next chain 1 space and chain 3. For row 2, we have 5 sets of 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochets, chain 2. For row 3, our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. We're going to stitch 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets in this first chain 2 space. And then chain 2. This brings us to our first chain 2 space on the side, and we're going to stitch 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space. 1 and 2. Then we'll chain 2. And that brings us to our next corner. And so in our corner, we're going to stitch 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. String there. There we go. And 2 double crochets, which brings us to our chain 2 space on the side. And so we'll stitch 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space. And chain 2. And so what we're doing for row 3 is we're stitching our corners, which is 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. Then we chain 2 and put 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space on the side like we did over here. We'll repeat this all the way around and join back to our chain 3. I've completed row 3 stitching 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the corner. Then we chain 2, 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space, chain 2, and repeat. Here's my last chain 2. I'm going to join to my top of my chain 3 with a slip stitch. I'm going to slip stitch in the next double crochet and then slip stitch in the chain 2 space and chain 3. Our chain 3 on every row will count as our first double crochet. And you can see we're already getting that pentagon shape that we want for our blanket. All right, now for row 4, we're going to be basically repeating what we did on row 3, only we're going to have 2 chain 2 spaces on the side instead of 1. So we'll stitch our corner the same. Our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, and then we'll double crochet, chain 2, and 2 double crochets in that first corner. And chain 2. We'll come to our next chain 2 space and stitch 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space. Then we'll chain 2 and stitch 2 double crochets in the next chain 2 space. Chain 2, and that brings us to our corner. We'll stitch 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets in that corner. Chain 2, 2 double crochets in the first chain 2 space on this side, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the second chain 2 space on this side, and chain 2. And so what we're doing is we're stitching our corner, 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets, chain 2, and then 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, chain 2, and we'll repeat this 3 more times on these 3 sides and join back to our chain 3. I've completed row 4. We have 5 corners, 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space, chain 2, 2 double crochets in that chain 2 space, chain 2, join to the top of my chain 3 like we did on the previous rows, and then slip stitched to the corner and chained 3. Now you'll notice that now on our sides we have 3 chain 2 spaces, and this is the way that the blanket grows. Each row will have an additional chain 2 space on each of the 5 sides. All right, so let's do our first corner. Our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, so we'll double crochet, chain 2, and 2 double crochets in this first corner, because remember our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet in our first corner, chain 2, and then we'll place 2 double crochets, chain 2 in each of the chain 2 spaces. So here's our first corner and our 3 chain 2, 2 double crochet, chain 2 all the way across, and with the chain 2, which brings us to our next corner, and again 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets, chain 2, and then we'll move across, 2 double crochets, chain 2 in each of these chain 2 spaces on this side. chain 2, and that brings us to our next corner. And so we'll repeat our corner, 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets in each of the 5 corners, or the last 3 corners, since we already done 2. And then we'll chain 2, 2 double crochets in each of those 3 chain 2 spaces on the side, and then chain 2 and repeat. And again, we'll do this around and join back to our chain 3. So I have completed row 5, and you'll notice now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 chain 2 spaces on each of our sides, and that's the way that the Pentagon blanket grows. Now for row 6, we're just going to repeat what we've been doing. 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets in each of the corners, then chain 2, and then 2 double crochets in each of the chain 2 spaces on the side. Chain 2 and 2 double crochets, 1 and 2, and chain 2. All right, so our chain 3 here counted as our first double crochet, and so we have 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. Then we chain 2 and place 2 double crochets, chain 2 in each of those chain 2 spaces. And then we'll repeat this on the 4 sides remaining on our pentagon, and then join back to our chain 3. I've completed row 6, and you'll notice now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chain 2 spaces on each side of our pentagon. And what we're going to do is to continue to repeat what we're doing. Our corners will be the same. Each side on each row will have an additional chain 2 space, and we'll continue to repeat how we're making our pentagon for 12 more rows. And that's if you're doing the size according to the pattern. If you're adding more rows, just measure as you go and continue to repeat until the pentagon is the size that you want. But keep in mind, we're going to have 3 rows for the trim if you're wanting it to be a precise size. For the written pattern, you need to continue to repeat what we've been doing for 12 more rows. Once your blanket is as large as you want it to be, and this of course is just my swatch that I'm working off of, but once your blanket is as large as you want it to be, you've joined to your chain 3, you slip stitched in the first double crochet, and then slip stitched in the chain 2 space, and then chain 1. And what we're going to do for the next row is we're going to just stitch a row of single crochet all the way around the 5 sides of our pentagon. In the corner, we're going to stitch 2 single crochets, 1, 2, we're going to chain 1, and then stitch 2 more single crochets. And you'll do this in each of the 5 corners. 2 single crochets, chain 1, and 2 single crochets. Then to form our solid row of single crochets across, you'll place 1 single crochet in each of the double crochets, and then you'll place 2 single crochets in the chain 2 space. 1 single crochet in each of the double crochets, 2 single crochets in the chain 2 space. And you'll do this across the side until you reach that corner. And of course, I'm working on a swatch, not my actual blanket, and so I don't have as far to go across. But just to repeat, 1 single crochet in each of the double crochets and 2 single crochets in the chain 2 spaces. And then that brings us to the next corner. We're going to place a single crochet in those 2 double crochets, and then in the chain 2 space of the corner we're going to stitch 2 single crochets, chain 1, and 2 single crochets. And then we'll repeat across 1 single crochet in each of the double crochets, and then 2 single crochets in the chain 2 spaces. And you'll work this all the way around your Pentagon blanket. And this is going to give us just a solid row of single crochet. This is going to help your blanket hold its shape and then sets us up for our pretty trim. I've completed the single crochet edge on my swatch. You might notice that it might be just a little bit ripply. It's okay. That is just the way we want the edge of the blanket to look. All right. So here's my last single crochet. I'm going to join to my first single crochet with a slip stitch, and then I'm just going to chain 1. The chain 1 does not count as a stitch. It just gets us up on top of where we want to work. Now, the next part of the trim, we're going to be stitching shell stitches. So we're going to go right in that first single crochet and stitch a single crochet. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and then in the next stitch, we're going to stitch 4 double crochets. And we're going to do this all the way around, and it's not going to matter if you're on a point or on an edge. It's all stitched the same. Single crochet, skip 2, 4 double crochet, shell stitch, skip 2, and single crochet. Skip 2, 4 double crochets in the next single crochet, skip 2 single crochets, and then single crochet in the next. Skip 2 single crochets and stitch 4 double crochets in the next stitch. And we'll continue to repeat the shell stitch, working all the way around our blanket until we reach back here and join. Now, one thing I will tell you is that you may not line up perfectly right here. If you added more rows, you're going to have more stitches. So you're just going to have to ease that in. You want to do your shell stitches as evenly as possible all the way around, and then join back to the single crochet. Skip 2, single crochet in the next, skip 2, and 4 double crochets in the next for our shell stitch. Skip 2 and single crochet in the next. And we'll work this all the way around all 5 sides till we reach back to our first single crochet. So I've completed my shell stitches working all the way around, and this is my big blanket. It's not my swatch. And I just wanted to show you at the end, it may not be exact. Where I joined on this one, there are 3. I ended up with 1 extra stitch of my single crochet row. It's okay, it's not a problem. We just go ahead and join in, and then we're going to do the next row. Now I've already started the next row, and the way that works is the first single crochet, you're going to stitch 2 double crochets. You're going to chain 2, and then in between, in the center of that shell stitch, in between the second and third double crochet, you're going to stitch a single crochet, and then you'll chain 2. Then that brings you to the next single crochet in between the next 2 shell stitches, and in that single crochet you're going to stitch 2 double crochets. Chain 2, you'll stitch a single crochet between the second and third double crochet of the next shell stitch. Chain 2, then you'll stitch a double crochet and then another double crochet. So we have 2 double crochets in the single crochet in between the shell stitches, and this is what forms that sort of heart looking stitch. Chain 2, single crochet between the second and third double crochet of the next shell stitch, chain 2, and 2 double crochets in the single crochet between our shell stitches. Chain 2. So the way the repeat works is chain 2, single crochet between the second and third double crochet of the shell stitch, and chain 2. 2 double crochets in that single crochet between the shell stitches. Let's bring this down a little. Chain 2, single crochet between the second and third double crochet of the shell stitch, chain 2, and 2 double crochets in the single crochet. And we'll just continue with our 2 chains, single crochet in the shell stitch, 2 chains or chain 2, and 2 double crochets in that single crochet between the shell stitches, and you'll continue this repeat all the way around all 5 sides of your pentagon, and you can see how those little heart shapes are popping right out. I've completed my last row all the way around my blanket, and this is my big blanket, not my swatch. And my last stitch here is my single crochet, chain 2, and then I'm going to join back to where I started with a slip stitch to those 2 double crochets in that single crochet stitch. Cut my yarn, tie off, and all I have left to do is to weave in this one end, because remember when we started, we went ahead and weaved in that beginning yarn in order to close the hole in the center of our blanket. All right, now I'm trying to stay within the color because I don't want a big splotch of this bright purple into my blue showing through. And so I'm just going back and forth, trying to go through fibers of the yarn and the stitches so that I know it's going to hold tight. And now my blanket is complete. So here is my completed swirling rainbow pentagon shaped blanket. Here's our beautiful trim that is shaped like hearts. Let's bring it down this way so you can see those hearts. And it makes a lovely trim. And it also gives the blanket a little bit of stability to hold its shape. And that's how you make the Pentagon swirling rainbow blanket.